One of the biggest threads that was going through our discussions in at least 2 meetings is that of system design. If you look at the future internet as something that might require at least changes, substantial changes to core parts of the internet, and they can be either very radical, but at least they will be substantial, then designing, we come to the problem of system dynamics automatically as a problem of designing a large-scale system that is more than just a technological challenge. So it needs an approach for a joint design that incorporates technology and socioeconomics in one design process. And if you start thinking about this, we are actually not very good in having that design process. It all exists somehow as an intermingled process of standardization and research and technological design, but we haven't really well reasoned and argued how this design could really be pulled through the entire community. And particularly important in the socioeconomic part is to obviously understand deployment challenges. So what happens if my system gets out there? And what are the incentives of players to actually deploy these things? One other part of a debate we had is about evolutionary mechanisms. There is a lot of talk about clean slate research and pushing the boundaries forward, but all of the clean slate projects I know about, and I'm part of what we call a clean slate research project myself, is denying the necessity for evolving from here to there. Even though you might want to push the edge, you have to get somehow there, and that requires evolutionary mechanisms. Right? So there's a need for evolution as a gradually developing process, but we also recognize that probably scope and speed of the dynamics is increasing through technology developments, not only through Moore's law, but also through the way people accept technologies. And how can we incorporate that in the way, again, in the processes we design solutions? And it seems that if you're looking at current ways of designing systems and that are trying to incorporate evolutionary mechanisms, the current processes are largely driven by a use case requirement specification phase that is relatively linear and is very little cyclic, if you will, or cyclic, if you will. So is there a way maybe that we can capture concerns of a growing number of stakeholders while the actual architecture and the system has already been designed? Is there a way of capturing this in a new set of evolutionary mechanisms that are different from the requirements engineering process that we have? And last but not least, one of the debates, try to focus on the research community itself, on what we call the research style debate. What are, in terms of research style in the community, we can differentiate between rational and empirical research styles, where the rational research style tries to rationalize about design and put a rigorous framework of research and evaluation as a test to the actual methods that I'm developing throughout my research, while the empirical research style, or another word for that is cold rules, is more about putting things into the field, testing them out and seeing if they break. And we recognize that we need a good mixture of both of them. There is no clear winner when it comes to addressing the immediate problems in the current internet, because there are advantages of either of these styles, and we have to reconcile them into a common way of doing research in the research community. And for that, we need to understand what we need and what we want to observe in order to pick maybe a certain balance towards one of these styles. Put the finger into what's the issue, so therefore there isn't one. And we're starting to see this in certain areas where we're actually saying, well, there doesn't seem to be really a disagreement there. And that's, I think, it's a valuable output in itself. So we start from the research community that we gathered in the actual meetings, but we also were looking at ways to involve the actual wider community. And I'll show you in a bit on how we actually do this in the project. So what's our current operational model? And this is something we eventually came up when we started thinking of what happens if we have our 4th meeting and the money runs out and we want to do meetings in the future. What is an operational model to keep this thing Eiffel running? And this is kind of like the chart we came up with. So it is output driven. It's a very simple form of output, but it is an output. And it's a commitment from the community to produce that output. It's not something the actual project does. Again, remember, it's a community of people who actually commit their own time on this. So what are the current white papers we work with? So we took this operational model and said, are you willing to do this? And keep in mind, if you do this, you invest your own time coming to the meetings as well as spending, writing, and thinking about this. And the community that assembled, at least in the last 2 meetings, agreed on this operational model and said, yes, it's a good idea, and we will do so. So we have picked up on a number of white papers that are currently worked on. I'll give you a rough idea of the ones we're currently working on in the next 2 slides. The first one is about a problem of what we call incentive alignment. So it goes towards the debate on system design. The problem here is the alignment of players' incentives, technological players as well as other non-technological stakeholders like governments, seem to play an important role in the future internet. That seems to be obvious from what I said before, but that's a very, very concrete problem we actually want to work on. So why is it important? What are the pieces of evidence why it is important? Where does it actually happen? What are the bits and pieces in system design where alignment of incentive happens? Think of standardization as one means of aligning incentives. You gather people in a room and over dinner, and you start agreeing of what could be a good constellation in your architecture. Coming back to our hidden objective that I mentioned before, have we fulfilled this objective of creating a sustainable think tank beyond funding? Only time will tell, but at least I believe we are on the right track. And the right track means the meeting here in October at this place is the first non-funded think tank. It was specifically taken up by the community when being asked the questions, will you come to a think tank meeting that isn't funded? So you won't get travel subsidies, and there was a very resounding yes.